Hi there, welcome to N7.4, Understanding Percent. Okay, this time when we're doing percent, it says that there's going to be fractional percents between 1 and 100%. So you might have something like 15.7%, whereas in previous years you would have just had the whole number. So now we're looking at portions of a percent. Okay, so creating a representation, either drawing a picture or telling about it or using numbers to show fractional percents between 1 and 100%. Expressing that percent as a decimal, which is what we just did up here. So as a decimal, this would be 0.157, and I'll show you how I did that in a few minutes. Solving problems that involve percent. This task right here, you have to be able to turn math into English and English into math. So I will show you how to translate those languages. Solving problems that involve finding a percent, determining the answer to percent problems, and this involves rounding off numbers. So when you're using money, you would do that for sure. Explain the meaning of a percent given in a particular context. So why are we using these numbers like this? Make and justify decisions or suggest courses of action based upon known percents for the situation. So here we go. The most important thing that you need to know about percents is that a percent is a portion. It shows part of a whole. Just like a fraction, just like a decimal. Okay, percent is the same thing. It's just another way to write that number. And the actual word percent, P-E-R-C-E-N-T, this is actually a French expression. Per means out of. Let me just change colors here. Means out of or for each. And cent is a French number. It is 100, so they pronounce it cent. And so percent would be out of 100, and that's where we get that word percent from. So remember these two very, 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 very important things, that when you're using percents, it's part of a whole, and it means that it's expressed as a number out of 100, as a fraction out of 100. So let's look at these two examples. I've got a fraction down here and a decimal. If you were to type 3 divided by 4, because a fraction bar means divide, right? If you were to type that into your calculator, 3 divided by 4, it would show you this. That would be your answer. So what does that mean as a percent? Well, most of us know that that's 75%. And the reason that we say that is because if it's out of 100, how many zeros are in 100? Well, there's 2. So how many decimal places should we move this guy? 2. The other way that we can think about this is 3/4 as a fraction. If we're going to turn that into something out of 100, we want to know what the percent is, right? So some unknown percent. You can say to yourself, well, what did they do to the 4 to turn it into 100? Well, they multiplied by 25. The law of fractions says what you do to the bottom, you have to do to the top. Okay, so your answer there would be 75. Once you have that 75 out of 100, you can say, well, anything out of 100 means percent. So that's 75%. Okay, so these two decimal places that we talked about before, this is showing tenths, and this is showing 100ths. So you can say, you can call this decimal 75 hundredths, right? If there's 2 decimal places in the question, there needs to be 2 zeros in your denominator, and that is how you read your decimal. Let's look at this example over here. This is where we get into percents that have a fraction within them or a decimal within them. If we see this on our calculator, 0.852, if we want to express that as a percent, using the skill that we just talked about, you'd move your decimal 2 places, okay? And you're looking at 85.2%. Because percent means out of 100, you're saying, well, that's 0.852 out of 100. And so if there's 2 zeros down here, that means we can move our decimal 2 places over. And we're looking at 85.2%. So just always remember that percent is talking about these first 2 digits after the decimal, the tenths and the hundreds. Okay, if you were given a number like this, .0745. Remember to just look at the 2. Your decimal would go there, and that is 7.45%. People might get mixed up and say, well, that's 74.5, because it seems natural to say 74%, but you're only ever moving your decimal those 2 places after the decimal, after the original decimal. Okay, a lot of scribbling going on this page. Let's try the next one. When you're doing percent, those 2 key things to remember are percent means, this is supposed to be an asterisk, yes, Miss Sar. Percent means out of 100. And we just figured out that you can express a percent by moving your decimal over 2 places. Okay, so 40% turns into 0.4. Does that make sense to everybody? Hopefully. So if your question is asking you, what is 40% of 17? Here's how you turn that into a math sentence. So right now we have an English sentence, what is 40% of 17? And we're going to turn it into math. So the word what, if we don't know the number that we need to use, we use a variable. We're going to use x in this particular case. So anytime you have a what, you can turn that into an x or an n or whatever variable you want to use. The word is means equals, just like saying 4 plus 5 is 9. 4 plus 5 is 9. Okay, so is means equals. We've already talked about the fact that 40%, this isn't a number. This is kind of like an English saying with this nice little symbol here, the percent sign. But if you wanted to turn that into an actual number, you would have to make it a decimal, 0.40 or 0.4, same thing. The word of means multiply. And I've shown my multiplication with brackets. We wouldn't want to show it with a times symbol because we're using an x as our variable, and so it would be confusing if we used both of those things in the same math sentence. So now that you're using percents, I suggest you use brackets or parentheses to show your multiplication. And then 17, this is already a number, so there it is as 17. So x is equal to 0.4 times 17. And if you type that into your calculator, you would get 6.8. So looking back at our original sentence, you can say 6.8 is 40% of 17. All right, now why do we need to know all this stuff? Well, you're going to see signs and use percents and all sorts of percenty things in your life. It's probably one of the most useful math skills that you'll come across. And sometimes, yes, it is confusing. Okay, so here is a percent that is bigger than 100. How to promote your next blog post and increase traffic by over 425%. So what does percent mean? What does that sign mean? Well, we just learned that it means out of 100. So just because this number is bigger than 100, that's fine. So 425, if I divided that on my calculator and did 425 divided by 100, we know that because there's 2 zeros in my denominator that I'm going to be moving my decimal back 2 places. Okay, so that is 4.25 4.25. That's what it would say on the calculator. So what they're saying is, in this ad, they're going to increase your blog post by 4 times. So if you got 20 blog posts in your first week and then you used whatever product they're advertising here, that would increase your traffic by 4 times. Okay, and you would get a number bigger than 80, whatever 20 times 4.25 is. So it sounds a lot more impressive for companies to report it as a percent, because 425% sounds huge. If we said we're going to increase your sales by 4 times, that doesn't sound as impressive. So that is why companies use percents to report different sales or promotions or profits or increases or whatever. So I'm just going to use the bottom of the screen to talk about those fractional percents again. This isn't actually in the grade 7 outcome because this is a percent that is bigger than 100, right? This is 425%, and that's technically not in the grade 7 curriculum, but you'll see it next year for sure. And some grade 8s might want to watch this here grade 7 video, so it's all good. Okay, so back to the task at hand. We're going to talk about 4.7%. Okay. What does percent mean? Percent means out of 100. So I would take that number and 4.7 and I would put it over 100. Okay. Now, if you typed this into your calculator, 4.7 divide by 100, it would give you, it would move your decimal place over 2 spaces. That's what it would give you. Okay, let's do one more example. 0.6972. Is what percent? Okay. Well, we know that any percent can be shown as being divided by 100. So if I took this and I times it by 100, I would have the opposite effect. So some number got divided by 100, that's what percent, and that was equal to 0.6972. Okay, so just solving an equation with preservation of equality like we've learned to do, what do you wish you had on the top of this fraction so that you could cancel out your hundreds? Well, I wish I had 100, and boom, my x is naked and alone, it's all good. But if I've multiplied by 100 right here, what I do to one side of my equation, right, this is an equal sign, so I have to keep everything the same. So that means I have to multiply by 100 on this side. Okay, multiplying 0.6972 by 100 is effectively just going to move the decimal over 2 spots. So 69.72 is what you would get if you used a calculator, and that is x. So what percent? Well, 69.72%. Alrighty, good luck with your fraction-y decimals.